Our next speaker is from the Pirate Party, Rodney Serkowski. Rodney, come on up.
I'm not as prepared as I'd like to be today. I was on all night on the phone with the police, trying to organise this today. But today I'm representing the Pirate Party, and we're here to protest the calls for violence against Julian Assange and the Wikileaks associates. We protest the contempt shown by our own politicians for an Australian citizen and for whistleblowers and whistleblowing services generally. First, I'd like to run through a few points. There is no legitimacy, absolutely none, to the claim that the publication of these documents is unlawful or wrong. It is a well-established tradition that the Fourth Estate must have the right to scrutinise and publish leaked documents. That legacy media have abdicated their journalistic responsibility means that services like Wikileaks are even more important in any open, modern, democratic framework. Second, there is no legitimacy to the claim it is wrong to leak. We had John Howard the other day stating that those that leak should be chased and prosecuted. Other politicians have denigrated leaking. This is not only wrong but ignorant. Public disclosure in the public interest is completely legitimate. We have a right to know about the government's operations, the circumstances and the impetus behind decisions and policy. We need this information to make informed choices on election day. Whistleblowing and whistleblowing services are an essential part of our democracy. We respect and admire those that have the intestinal fortitude to make public disclosures. Bradley Manning, the alleged leaker, is a hero and should not be slandered as anything less by our politicians. Thirdly, we do not accept that the release of these diplomatic cables is wrong. We recognise the necessity for confidentiality. However, this trust that we place in our politicians and our diplomats has been abused and is lost. The regular and routine deceit of diplomats, of our politicians, in saying one thing, doing another, and telling the public yet another, has increased the suspicion of government officials and diplomats. We are being systematically lied to about the conduct of governmental affairs. It seems as though when something is immoral, unethical, or questionable, it becomes classified. There is legitimate public interest, and there is absolutely no evidence that these disclosures have caused any harm, except maybe a little embarrassment. The systematic targeting of WikiLeaks has demonstrated that the cause of transparency, of openness, is the cause of many. The internet is a hydra, and the Pirate Party, we host up-to-date servers in Sweden and in Australia. We mirror what WikiLeaks publishes. Pirate parties all across the world are now doing this. The Pirate Party has as its central tenets the freedom to communicate in privacy, the freedom to share knowledge, information and culture, and a transparent, participatory government. We want substantive, meaningful changes, not hollow, meaningless platitudes to open government. WikiLeaks is delivering us a chance, a once-in-a-generation chance to implement substantive changes. We say to everyone here today, demand change, demand protections for journalistic sources, demand protection for whistleblowers, demand protection of free speech, demand anti-corruption mechanisms, demand a modern media initiative for Australia. Let's make Australia a free speech haven. We'd just like to say there's another rally being prepared for January 15 and we hope to see you all there. Please come along and help build this movement.
Thank you. Our second last speaker today is one of the main organisers, Kiraz Janicke. Come up.
Hi, I'm from the WikiLeaks Support Coalition that helped organise this rally today. I'm also an independent journalist and a feminist activist. And some people have asked, why, as a feminist, are you coming out to rally in support of Julian Assange, who's facing allegations of rape in Sweden? But this rally is not about that. I'm not going to comment on the rights and wrongs of the charges or the allegations in Sweden against Assange, because the reality is, in the midst of all the media spin, we don't know. But this rally is about the right to a fair trial, free from outside influence. free speech, for freedom of information and freedom from persecution. The UK Independent has reported that Sweden and the US have been involved in secret negotiations to extradite Assange to the United States, where he could possibly face charges of espionage. We say to the Swedish government, if this is only about sexual assault allegations, then they should come out now and guarantee that they won't do a deal with the United States and extradite Assange. I say, as a fighter for women's rights, that we must never, never, never let them use our struggle against sexual assault for their struggle against free speech. And by them, I mean the corrupt governments, the US government, our government here in Australia, and the corporations and media organisations that are trying to silence Wikileaks. Because this is about them and us. And by us, I mean the peoples of the world who have come out to stand as one and to defend Wikileaks, to defend the right to freedom of information and free speech. As citizens, we have a right to know what our governments are doing in our name. And if our governments were truly democratic, if our governments were really governments of the people, for the people and by the people, then they would have nothing to hide. But what the Wikileaks cables show is that our governments have plenty to hide. These cables expose the raw workings of the US empire, a whole litany of abuses, from corruption to espionage, to the cover-up of war crimes, the murder of innocent civilians, and the unbridled assault on any country that opposes US domination. And they show the complicity of the Australian government in this agenda. In whose name was Rad talking when he came out and said we should prepare to use force against China? Who? I mean, who can tell me honestly they would have voted for Mark Arbib if they had have known he was a US spy? The cables show that our government knew, while governments knew that the Sri Lankan government was committing war crimes against the Tamil people, our government said nothing. Our government was silent. The cables show the unwavering support of the Gillard government for Israel's brutal occupation of the Palestinian people. And the latest cables that come out today show that our government is engaged in a massive military build-up that they can't even afford for a war drive that no one supports. And while they're doing this, at the same time as they're spending our money, the Australian public's money, on a massive military build-up, they're slashing out funding for our schools, our hospitals, for our public services. And I think this really gets to the heart of the issue. What kind of democracy do we live in? The issue of Wikileaks goes much further than free speech. Wikileaks has given us the information, but it's up to us to act on it. And if our governments aren't democratic, then we need to make them democratic. We need to build this campaign in our workplaces, on the streets, talk to all of your friends, your family, everyone, and get them to come on board and build the movement and build the rally for January 15. It's going to be part of a global day of action in support of government, transparency and freedom of speech. It's not a crime to expose war crimes. And I say, free Bradley Manning. It's not a crime to tell the truth. Stop the crackdown on
Well, ladies and gentlemen, before we have our last speaker, I wanted to say something very, very briefly. It was mentioned in a few other of the talks, but one of the major issues that Wikileaks obviously has brought out is how our own government sees the war in Afghanistan. Not activists, but how our own government sees it. And essentially they see it as a disaster. And yet, here we are, about 2 months after Julie Gillard said, we're going to be there for another decade at least. No one else has been saying that apart from the Australian government. So the question really is, at what point does our media stop repeating press releases as news? At what point, for example, at what point does the Australian media make a choice? That when a government official, Gillard, Rudd, someone else talks about the war, they don't simply publish it and cut and paste, which is what often journalists are doing. Shame. Our final speaker tonight is Patrick Langosch, also one of the organisers of today, and I introduce Patrick. Welcome.
Thank you, everybody. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say that leaks happen. They happen because in all the bureaucracies, in all the militaries, in all the corporations of the world, they're made up of ordinary human beings. And some of those human beings out there have clear consciences that say, I cannot abide by what I am seeing. I cannot keep silent about war crimes. I cannot keep silent about profiteering, about the exploitation of the environment, about the exploitation of people, about the attacks in Sri Lanka. I cannot keep silent, and I'm going to do something about it. And it's always been the greatest fear of the people who rule our world. The fact that they actually rely on us to do everything for them. Because actually people like Bradley Manning, people who've leaked all throughout history, they're not traitors, they're not terrorists, they're goddamn heroes. Today, we are not just a rally here in Sydney. There is a rally happening right now down in Melbourne and in Adelaide. Today, we are the first cab off the rank of global protests that are happening to correspond with Assange's appearance in the court in London. There are demonstrations have happened or will be happening very soon all over the world. In London, New York, Minneapolis, Miami, Manchester, Canberra, Hobart, San Jose, Atlanta, Washington, Hamburg, Berlin, Montreal, Vienna, Lisbon, Amsterdam, Madrid, Barcelona, Valencia, Dublin, Buenos Aires, Lima, Mexico, Stockholm, and many, many more. And I think it's very clear when you think of why. John Pilger has put the question, has WikiLeaks done anything good? Yes. Has they done anything good for us? You know, we can dismiss these things that they haven't done anything bad, but have they done something good? And I think he answered it the only way you could. Geez, that must be one of those devil's advocate questions, because quite frankly, if you need to be told why truth and democracy is a good thing, then something is terribly wrong. The movement of people around the world that support WikiLeaks, the fact that over 600,000 people have signed the online petition defending Assange, the fact that there are now over 1,800 mirror sites for the WikiLeaks and they can't get it off the internet. The fact that Julian Assange has the poll for Time, the readers' poll for Times Person of the Year has just closed. They announce the results tomorrow. Well, let's hope they've gone with the people's choice, which is Julian Assange, who has got more than 380,000 votes. He beat the guy coming second by over 150,000 votes. We stand here today as part of that international movement to support freedom of speech, to support the freedom of the media, and to support open and accountable government. And we do it today with a few obstructions. We've been in negotiations with the New South Wales Police since last night. We asked them a very simple request. We would like to march. We would like to march to the US Consulate General because the US has been coordinating and spearheading the political attacks against Wikileaks and against Julian Assange. We got a very simple response. Oh, sorry, Oprah's in town. Sorry, we don't have the resources. The New South Wales Police can't possibly do it because we have to spend $5 million of taxpayers' money and shut down half the city for Oprah. They can do this, but they can't shut down George Street for half an hour for people's freedom of speech. Well, some people are saying go to the Opera House, but I don't think they'll quite let us do that. Now, the police have told us that they don't have these resources, but I think anyone who's looked around and seen the number of police that have been mobilised to make sure that we don't march, well, I think they've got enough people to actually close off the traffic on a couple of streets and let a few hundred people march to the US consulate to have their voices heard, to actually shut down George Street for just half an hour for just, you know, the little triviality of freedom of speech and democracy. I think it's an absolute shame that the New South Wales Police would be out here trying to stop our demonstration. So, I don't know if we're going to march. Anthony's going to put this to the crowd afterwards. I think, you know, I don't answer to the New South Wales Police. I answer to the crowd here. I answer to the people who are here at this demonstration and the citizens of this country and want to express their democratic right. But I just want to say that... Sorry. Who does want to march? Can we get a cheer for that? Any opposed? We can use the footpath? We could. Well, we've been in negotiations with the police, and so I'm going to pass back to Anthony, just to sum up for the rally and everything else. But the New South Wales Police have heard us. They've heard that we want to march. We're willing to do it on the footpath. We're willing to give them some marshals. We've been more than, you know, well, I won't say compromising. We haven't compromised. We do want to march. So, Anthony, is he still around?
Yeah. All right. Let me basically outline what's going on now. We have basically been told that we aren't allowed to march. However, ultimately, it's not my place to say what people want to do. If people want to march, they should march. But be aware of the fact that the police have said they will stop us marching, and that it is therefore our choice how to manage that. Now, they shouldn't be able to stop on the footpath. I completely agree. I'm only saying what I've been told to pass on. That's the information we have. That's the situation as it is. So, that's how it is. Let me just close this very quickly, then we can... I mean, if I ask to take a vote, what do people want to march or not march? What's the vote? Yeah, it's quite... Yeah, okay. Okay, all right. Let me just close today by saying that thank you all for coming. The importance of an event like tonight is to show the Australian government and the general public, and indeed the media, that a lot of people are pretty upset with what's happening with Wikileaks and also with Assange. We demand the Australian government stands up for its own citizen, hardly a controversial idea. And secondly, the idea that the media and those of us in the public believe that free speech actually matters, that documents released by Wikileaks are in the public interest, clearly. And we know that because the government has no intention of prosecuting anyone in the media. I rest my case on that point. So, in terms of what to do now, I'm not really sure how to manage this, but basically... Yeah, as I said, Pardon? There's going to be an event on the 15th of January about Wikileaks. My understanding is at Town Hall. More information coming soon. Yeah, just give me 2 moments. Yes, just been told by Stuart Rees, just for the record, that if we stroll down the footpath hand in hand, it's not actually a march. It's a romantic stroll. So I guess that's one way to see it. I'm sure our dear leaders will share that view. But anyway, thank you all for coming. God bless and good night.